So it's official, with the release of the first couple of episodes of Hell's Paradise, all three of the Dark Trio manga are officially in their anime era. And Hell's Paradise is not only my favorite out of the three, but also probably the longest out of the three.
Nick, it's only 127 chapters, and JJK is well over 200.
Sit down and read a chapter of Hell's Paradise, you'll realize it's longer than JJK. And that means we got Hell's Paradise for probably the next 6 to 10 years. Which means you're gonna get to see this face talking about it a whole lot. Especially because Hell's Paradise, while my favorite manga, is also very confusing. Now, it's not as confusing as JJK, but it's not nearly as straightforward as Chainsaw Man. And while having a basic understanding of Buddhism or Taoism does certainly make understanding Hell's Paradise a lot easier, probably the most complicated thing about Hell's Paradise is its incredibly rich and well thought out power system. It's a power system that goes by the name of Tao. See, Tao is what happens when you take all the best parts of chakra and Nen and make them slightly religious, as the energy system of Tao is based off of Taoist principles. Now, for those of you who aren't ancient Asian theologists, Taoism is an ancient Chinese religion that is usually associated with Buddhism, but is very unique in its own right. The reason it's usually associated with Buddhism is because it preaches unity with the universe, which is why Tao as a power system is very similar to chakra and Nen, where it exists in every living being. And maximizing one's own Tao potential is learning how to tap into the energy around them. But there is a lot, and I mean a lot more to Tao than simply just that. Which is why today you should sit back, relax, and bust out those notebooks, because today we're doing a comprehensive look at Tao and its influences. Today we're going to be answering questions like, what can you do with Tao? How do you master Tao? What are the principles of Tao? And what is a Tao element? How do Tao elements interact? And what does all of this have to do with yin and yang? But before we answer any of those questions, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. And if you like spiritual conversations based around ancient religions, then you're probably gonna hate my new anime podcast that I'm doing with Danny Mata, where we break down everything that happens in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But if you like anime, then you're gonna love it. So Tao, is it like chakra, or is it like Nen, or is it like cursed energy, or is it like any other power system we've ever seen? And while the idea of a power system being an energy that runs through all living things is not necessarily new to anime at all, Tao approaches this ideology in a very new and interesting way, operating in a practical sense like Nen, but also tying its roots to religion like chakra and chi. But in order to give you the best possible understanding of what Tao is, we're gonna have to start this video off in the way that we tend to start these videos off, by answering the easy questions. The first of which being, what is Tao? Well, Tao in its most simple sense is a life force energy that exists in all living and non-living things. This phone, this notebook, this YouTuber all have Tao. This energy can be manifested and wielded to increase any kind of ability you could dream of. It can make you faster, can make you stronger, can conceal your presence, it can light you on fire. And once somebody has truly mastered Tao, they acquire the powers of God. But that's kind of an incredibly wide berth explanation. So let's dive a little bit deeper into Tao. See, like we've already covered, Tao is the life force energy of all living and non-living things. But let's focus on that word life force. See, think of your Tao like a ticking meter of how much life you have left to live. Like that really bad Justin Timberlake movie. Was it called Time? Everything that you do, thinking, breathing, eating, all consumes Tao. Now, before you stop breathing or thinking or moving, Tao can be generated. Specifically, Tao is generated in the Tenzin. See, the Tenzin is a part of your body directly below your navel. This is also the central point that all of the Tao in your body flows through. Therefore, for a Tao user, the Tenzin is basically like their heart. Those who have their Tenzin slashed will die, as not only will they be able to generate more Tao, they won't be able to circulate their Tao. In life, when it comes to living beings, happens when your body runs out of Tao. See, the Tao of a living being will begin to disintegrate when their body is on the verge of death. And when their Tao completely vanishes, the body will die. What's interesting about this, though, is that even though technically the living Tao inside that person's body is gone, their body will still contain Tao, but only in the capacity that a rock or a tree contains Tao, implying that on a spiritual level, that dead body has become part of nature. Now, that is the most Spark Notes of all Spark Notes version of what Tao is. If you were to peel back even one more layer of the onion, it would bring you to the yin-yang aspect of Tao, as the yin-yang aspect of Tao is its main component. See, earlier when I told you that Tao was created in your Tanden, what I didn't tell you is that that's only under specific circumstances. See, Tao is only manifested when the Tao user is following the Buddhist middle way. Do any of my theologians want to tell the class what that means? No, I have to do it? Okay. See, the middle way is one of the major aspects of the Dharma in Buddhism. What the middle way refers to in Buddhism is living a life not filled with extremes. That is to say that the middle way of Buddhism ignores things like self-denial, but it also ignores things like self-indulgence. It ignores things like eternalism, but also ignores things like annihilationism. This middle way of Buddhism asks that you don't take too much from life, but you also don't give out too much of yourself. You are to exist in harmony with the things around you, making sure you don't live in abject poverty, but also making sure that you don't live as a billionaire. As a Buddhist with nothing to give to the world can't help the world around them, while a Buddhist who hoards too much for themselves isn't sharing with those around them. And this is the key principle of Tao. Except in Tao, the middle way is more about acceptance of oneself. The middle way as it regards to Tao is about accepting your strengths and your weaknesses, identifying and loving the things about yourself that make you strong, but also identifying and loving the things about yourself that make you weak. In the case of Gabimaru, his training as a shinobi makes him strong, but his love for his wife makes him weak. It's not until he accepts and embraces both parts of himself that he can begin to make Tao at his highest level. Now, this applies to more than just your strengths and your weaknesses. You also have to balance your rage and your serenity, your stillness and your emotion, the dark inside of you with the light. And the further that you lean into these individual emotions and feelings and concepts, the stronger your Tao becomes. To use Gabimaru as another example here, when he feels more love for Yui, his Tao spikes. Yui is Gabimaru's wife. Now, the reason that this spikes Gabimaru's Tao is because there's a balance between how much he loves Yui and how much he misses being by her side. And since how much he wants to be back by Yui's side is a strength that's pushing him forward, while his love for her is technically a weakness, that is a yin-yang thing that spikes his Tao. Sagiri is also an incredible example of this, as Sagiri knows that her training as an Asaimon makes her one of the strongest Asaimon ever, but her dislike of harming people and her unsure self is a weakness. Once Sagiri was able to accept both of these parts of herself, she became one of the strongest characters in the manga. Life and death also spike Tao. That is to say that one on the brink of death fighting to stay alive has a massive spike to their Tao. And because humans are emotional and therefore able to spike their Tao whenever they feel these emotions, their Tao is considered to be of the highest quality, which is why Lord Tenzin, who are inherently non-emotional, use them to make Tan, as Lord Tensin aren't able to go through these emotional spikes that spike their Tao. Now that we have that covered, we should talk about the elements of Tao, of which there is 5: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. Now, while the elemental part of this might sound similar to chakra, it actually operates closer to Nen, as the 5 elements exist in a circle, and the positions in this circle are very important, as the circle travels clockwise. And in order to explain this in the best possible way, let's take water, for example. See, water exists, I guess, right here. You're probably looking at a picture of it right now through the beauty of editing. If Cody couldn't find an English version of this, water is the blue one. The element clockwise of water is wood. This means a couple of things, the most important of which is that the water element is beneficial to the wood element. But beneficial in what capacity? How does the water element help the wood element? If water Tao and wood Tao meet each other, do they make a Kekkei Genkai? Not exactly. See, Tao is largely built around physical contact between two Tao users, which would mean that if a Tao user with the water element were to come in physical contact with a Tao user of the wood element, the Tao user of the water element would refill the Tao of the wood user. Now, this is called the cycle of restoration, and it works for all 5 elements. Whatever element is clockwise of another element helps the element in front of it. Wood helps fire, fire helps earth, earth helps metal, metal helps water, and water helps wood. But since everything in Tao is focused on yin and yang, while there's restorative properties between the elements, there's also hindering properties, and these work a bit differently. Think of these like Pokemon matchups, where one element is super effective against a different element. Now, this doesn't operate through clockwise or counterclockwise, but instead by creating a pentagram in the middle of the circle. Or even simpler terms, if an element skips the one that it restores and goes to the one that the one it restores, that's the element it deters. Water is effective against fire, earth is effective against water, and so on and so forth. And every person, through either training or birth, is given one of these elements. And this is where Tao separates itself from both Nen and chakra. As obviously with chakra, it's kind of like see how many elements you can collect, and with Nen, you're 100% effective at your main category, but 80% effective at the 2 categories closest to your main category. The restoration cycle is referred to as Sosei. Outside of refilling somebody's diminished Tao, it also makes the person who's being restored's Tao significantly stronger. Even those who haven't unlocked or figured out Tao yet, if they're in contact with the right kind of person, are able to use Tao at a somewhat high level. And you don't even necessarily need to make physical contact with somebody to activate Sosei, as you can imbue an item like a weapon with your Tao and give it to somebody you have a favorable connection with. That Tao, once it comes into contact with their own, gives them the Sosei boost. Well, the hindering cycle is referred to as Sokoku. Now, should 2 people with the same element battle, whoever has greater mastery in Tao will be victorious. Now, I did kind of lie when I said there was only 5 types of elemental Tao, as there is a 6th element for Tao that doesn't exist on our perfect little graph, and that Tao type is Flower Tao. See, Flower Tao, also known as Plant Tao, offers immortality. Well, in a sense. See, once one acquires Flower Tao, they get longevity and regeneration abilities. That is to say that a Flower Tao user who's able to keep their Tao circuit intact can survive pretty much forever. Before you jump on the Flower Tao train, you're like,
Oh my god, it's our way to immortality.
unfortunately, it doesn't work for humans. See, Flower Tao does technically give longevity and regeneration to humans. However, there's the added fact that it also makes humans into trees, where the humans who were given Flower Tao begin to bloom flowers and enter a state of eternal bliss. However, that state of eternal bliss is basically growing flowers out of your body as part of the ground for eternity. You're not dead, but you're not really alive, but you got a big old smile on your face. The real people who benefit from Flower Tao are the Lord Tensin, but this is because the Lord Tensin are artificial humans created out of Flower Tao. Now, humans can maximize the regenerative properties of Flower Tao, as any human who begins to use Flower Tao can have their head cut off or their arms broken off, and they will regrow. And when they regrow these limbs or heads, vines will appear on their body that'll eventually fade. But unfortunately for these humans, even though they have achieved longevity and practical immortality, slowly but surely their body will turn into a tree. Well, in most circumstances, but we'll get to that later. But if these Lord Tenzin are able to live forever and recover from anything, how do you kill them? Well, this is where the Tonden comes in. So the only real chance that any human has at defeating a Lord Tenzin is if they have a favorable element. That is to say that the Lord Tenzin has the water element and the human has the fire element, or something like that. With the favorable element matching, the regenerative abilities of the Lord Tenzin will be slow. The wounds they would usually recover from in 1 second if there wasn't a favorable matchup for the humans, they now recover from in 5 or 10 seconds, which is big when battling something with technically infinite regeneration. This human with a favorable matchup then has to slash the Tonden. Now, technically, it doesn't have to be the person with the favorable matchup to slash the Tonden. Anybody with sufficient Tao to cut through it should do. And in some circumstances, the person with the favorable matchup against the Lord Tensin will simply put their Tao into contact with the Lord Tensin's Tao to stop their cycle. That is to say, to weaken them and put them at a point where the person with enough Tao to cut through the Tonden can cut through the Tonden. Now, technically, the regeneration of Flower Tao is not infinite. Remember that Tao is life force. Whether that be fire, water, metal, or Flower Tao, using it is expending your own life force. So every time that a Lord Tensin is cut, or any user of Flower Tao is cut, they have to use some of their Tao, some of their life force to regenerate. And if done improperly, this can destroy the user. It can do something abstract, like take the memories of the user, as their head Tao is now all jumbled. Or it can do something extreme, like age the user, cutting their life force literally. But the Lord Tensin have a little thing called Tan, which is made essentially from the fermented Tao of humans. And upon consuming this Tan, their Tao is refilled, which grants them immortality in the sense of being forever young. Now, the reason that the Lord Tensin are so powerful in Tao is because they are physical embodiments of the middle way. Lord Tenzin are basically incapable of emotion, but it goes beyond that. The majority of them are immortal, but at the same time, they want to know what mortality is like, craving death. And even further than that, all of the Lord Tenzin are genderless, being able to be both a woman or a man. So everything about them embodies the middle way, which is why they're so practiced in Tao. But to go one step beyond that, that's also because every single Lord Tenzin has mastered the 5 techniques of immortality. See, there are 5 training methods that allow you to master Tao. The first of which is Doi, which involves physical exercise to increase your Tao circulation. The second is Taisoku, which involves breathing techniques. The third third is Shoitsu, which involves meditation. And the fourth is Shuten, which involves becoming akin to the travel of Tao through your body and organs. And the fifth and final exercise is Bochujutsu. See, Bochujutsu requires sexual intimacy with somebody of the opposite chi. Now, this can mean a lot of things. It could mean sexual intimacy with somebody who is angry when you're a mellow person. It could mean sexual intimacy with a man when you're a woman. So long as you're yin and they're yang, or vice versa, it works out. And by joining through sexual intercourse, yin and yang come together and strengthen both partners, which allows you to better understand the Tao of your partner, which allows you to reflect on your own Tao. And I shit you not, for Bochujutsu to work its best, you have to take your sexual partner's interests into mind, as by being accommodating to your sexual partner, you are tapping into their chi, or their Tao. So that's how you get Tao and what Tao is. But what can you use Tao for? Well, kind of everything. See, Tao can be used for sensing, enhancing, erasing your presence, shooting off invisible projectiles. Really, if you want it to happen, it can happen with Tao. But let's dive more into the specifics here. See, Tao in the capacity of sensing operates very similar to Nen or Chakra, or really any power system in any anime ever. See, once a user awakens to the use of Tao, they gain a sixth sense, the ability to sense the Tao of those around them. And by tapping into this ability, the Tao user is able to see everything about this person, their body shape, if they're holding a weapon, their hairstyle. And because of this, people like Shion, who are blind, are still able to see everything around them, as everything on Earth has Tao, and therefore, if you're able to sense all of the Tao around you, you can see it. Tao operates a bit like echolocation, but more like sight than anything. But sensing Tao is substantially better than sight. You see, because sensing how Tao moves allows you to read the movements of others before they even possibly make them. Therefore, those who are practicing sensing Tao are able to predict exactly where you're gonna attack, which makes it easy to dodge. On top of this, once you master sensing through Tao, you're able to see Tao weaknesses in other people. Places where a person's Tao may be weaker than others, which are their weak spots. Places you can exploit with your own attacks. Outside of sensing, there's also enhancement, which is relatively obvious. Think of this a bit like Ko in Hunter x Hunter. And for those of you who aren't complete Hunter x Hunter nerds, think of it as Gon's Rock. By focusing all of your Tao into one place, you're able to make said place strong, much in the same way that Gon focuses all of his Nen into his fist, which is something that people like Chobe use. However, you can also funnel your Tao into a weapon. And weapons imbued with Tao, even if they don't hit vital spots, still do massive damage to enemies, as your Tao is forcibly entered into an enemy's body, which throws off their own Tao cycle. However, imbuing a weapon with Tao is dangerous, because you're separating your Tao, your life force, from your body. However, enhancement can also be used defensively. If you know you're about to be struck in a certain place, you can shift your Tao to there, to harden that part of your body. Anime-only watchers have actually already seen this happen when Gabimaru hardened the back of his neck, though he was doing it accidentally, and without knowing that it was Tao. Further mastery over Tao allows you to pull off something in Hunter x Hunter referred to as Zetsu. See, those who have an insane mastery over their Tao are able to suppress their presence, and this is accomplished by suppressing your Tao to a level where you're not noticeable to those who can detect it. But those are just the basics, the kind of non-interesting things that Tao can do. Let's talk about the jutsu. Lord Tenzin loved to turn their Tao into invisible projectiles. At least they're kind of invisible. See, Lord Tenzin turned their Tao into a projectile and fire it at enemies. Now, to those who can't sense Tao, this is invisible because you don't see Tao coming off me right now. However, if you do tap yourself into Tao and learn how to detect it, these are very visible projectiles, which makes these projectiles incredibly deadly to those who haven't awoken to Tao, but kind of mundane to those who have. Outside of this, Tao users are also able to transmute their Tao into an element. Now, this usually manifests as ninjutsu, meaning that we only ever really see ninjas do it. One of the higher ranking entities on the island was able to turn their Tao into lightning. But by and large, we're talking about ninjutsu. And the most clear and obvious ninjutsu we've seen thus far is Gabimaru's penchant for fire, where Gabimaru is able to heighten the temperature of his body and light the oils on his skin on fire, which allows him to do things like light rocks on fire and throw them at people, or just spit fire. Now, for a long time, Gabimaru wasn't aware that this technique required Tao. He simply knew it as ninjutsu or ninpo. And the same could be said for Yuzuria's control over her bodily fluids, as Yuzuria is able to drink certain potions that make her secrete different bodily fluids that she can control, which can give her the ability to make goo that traps people or create poisonous spider cages. Now, ninjutsu is a really, and I mean really rough version of Tao, as perfect usage of Tao simply focuses on using the Tao in your body in precise and meaningful ways. That is to say, to not be wasteful with one's Tao. In fact, a user of Tao in a perfect situation shouldn't expend any Tao, really. But ninjutsu and ninpo use a ton of Tao. Therefore, those who use it burn through the Tao in their body very quickly, which has massive repercussions. 1, it makes the recovery of your strength damn near impossible. 2, it can rob you of your memories. And 3, it can rob you of your humanity as a whole. It can go so far as to drain you of all of your life force, killing you instantly. And therefore, ninjutsu can pretty much accomplish anything that Tao can, but in a much rougher, less effective way, as we've seen ninjas with Hojutsu, the next thing we're going to be talking about. See, since Tao is in everything, Tao is also in the air, and therefore one of the Lord Tenzin, who I'm not going to name because it's kind of a spoiler, is able to create footholds out of the air, allowing them to sit in the middle of the air and essentially run through the air in a flying capacity. That is to say that through the usage of Tao, one of the Lord Tenzin has acquired levitation, something that we've seen from ninjas from Iwa in a much rougher sense. But since Tao is in everything and people are able to make footholds out of air Tao, does that mean that you can manipulate all of the elements around you if you're mastered enough in Tao? Yes. Yes, it absolutely does. See, complete mastery over Tao allows you to control all Tao, meaning you can control the Tao of every living and non-living being on Earth, giving you an ability much akin to psychokinesis. We've seen this ability used by Doshi to control insects to attack certain enemies, and by upper level Lord Tensin to simply just crush people like they're using the Force. But it goes beyond psychokinesis a little bit, as somebody who's able to master all of the Tao around them is also able to inflict elemental Tao onto the things around them, as the same Lord Tenzin who was able to crush somebody like they were using the Force is able to light incense from far away, or stop fire from rising, but can even go one step beyond this, becoming akin to alchemy in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, where this psychokinesis user can create spikes out of the ground, using their mastery over Tao to control the Tao in the very ground. Not to mention that this very same Lord Tensin also has the ability to clone themselves, making each of these synthetic clones out of flower Tao that they can control from a distance. And since each of these individual clones is made out of flower Tao, they're able to regenerate just like the original. And these clones have individuality, characteristics, and free will. Lastly, and probably most rarely, we see Tao used to pull off illusions or genjutsu. And these genjutsu or illusions are so complete that the user is able to tap into the 5 senses of the person they're manipulating, making them see, taste, smell, see, and feel the genjutsu around them. And that's kind of everything. Obviously, I could go into the fact that Senin level threats like the Doshi are able to transmute their body into their own element of sorts. It's shown that high-level Tao users are able to use that psychokinesis to surround their bodies with the element that they prefer to use. The most specific circumstance we saw this with is when 2 Doshis surrounded their bodies with butterflies and centipedes, which gave them a pseudo final 4, but it's unclear whether this is an application of the psychokinesis or an entirely separate thing. And with that, that's pretty much everything. So as you can see by the length of this video, Tao is very complicated, yet very fleshed out and interesting. And while I tried not to spoil anything, and I feel as though I didn't really spoil anything that important, you should now have as comprehensive an understanding of Tao that you need heading into the Hell's Paradise anime. And hopefully with this comprehensive understanding of how the power system of the universe works, you get to enjoy the anime just that much more. Tell me guys, did I miss anything about Tao? Did you love our little lesson about Taoism and Buddhism? Tell me in the comments below. While you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. 10 more years of talking about a show centered around ninjas and ninjutsu. I got this.